Tech Cocktail Sessions, educational and inspirational talks from experienced startup founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders.
Hi, everybody. So I'm going to share a couple of secrets about myself first that aren't closely held, but the first is I am a culture junkie. So I'm having a great time here because I feel like I'm in the mecca of culture, surrounded by Tony and Zappos. The other secret that's also not closely held is I'm a psychologist. So I promise I won't analyze you deeply from up here on the stage. Although I do have notes because I do have a tendency to analyze, which takes me way off topic. I rattle on, people have to redirect me. This is a lot easier. So I am a psychologist by training. I'm a clinical psychologist. That's where my PhD is from. But I've worked as a business psychologist my whole career. I worked with CEOs and business leaders, boards of directors on senior human capital issues, from selection to development, strategic planning. But the piece that I gravitated towards quickly and became my passion was company culture. And during the time of working with companies, I realized that culture, which I define as how we do things here at our company, there's a lot of really complex, academic, frankly, really confusing definitions of culture out there in blogs and journal articles and tweets. But I think of culture as how we do things here. So most people agree that culture is critical in organizations. I'll give you a few statistics. Culture is not just fluffy feel-good stuff. Although I think the people at Zappos would agree that when it's strong and aligned, it does feel good. But culture sits at the heart, the foundation of organizations. It is at the core of both successes that organizations have, whether it's performance or bridging a new technology, and at the core of failures organizations have. Low productivity, poor retention, losing top talent, low morale. Pretty much all of those have culture that sits at the core. Culture explains 89% of whether an employee will thrive or fail in your organization. 89%. What you do, skills, abilities, background, experience, only accounts for 11% of an organization's success. That's a pretty shocking statistic. And yet, I hardly ever get anything but head nodding. We all get, we all fundamentally understand and intuitively believe that culture is critical. And what's also true is that there's no single right culture. There are as many flavors of cultures as there are companies. What's critical for success, what we know is true, is that a culture is well understood and well aligned. So some of you in the audience might think, well, we're entrepreneurs. We have either serial startups or we're just coming up with a burgeoning idea. I have one employee. So culture probably doesn't matter to me right now. It's something I'll pay attention to later. This must be for the large organizations you work with. I hear that a lot. And in fact, it couldn't be more wrong. There is no better time to pay attention to your culture than right now, right at the beginning. So typically, as a consultant, I was brought in to help companies fix their cultures. If you can start at the beginning of your company, the beginning of your initiative, Downtown Project is a perfect example, and identify what's core to you. What are the 3 to 5 core values that are important here, and build everything you do around it, you have a much greater chance of success than organizations or initiatives that don't. 70% of culture change initiatives fail. So why? Well, it goes back to some good psychobabble data. We are all pretty hardwired in terms of our core personalities and attributes by the time we reach adulthood, and certainly by the time we enter the work world And many developmental psychologists believe that it's much sooner than that. Some believe it's birth. It's a nature versus nurture conversation. But what is agreed on is that we have 5 decades of personality research that demonstrate that that core of who we are tends to remain very stable over the course of our adult lives. So does that mean you can't change as a person? Of course not, absolutely. But it's very difficult to change. Most people don't do it. When you make change, most of us frankly revert to our long-held behaviors within a matter of months. We have a lot of good statistics behind that. That's why the ROI on conventional remediation coaching programs and is abysmal, because we're a lot better at focusing on who we are, what we're good at, what we value, and leveraging that than we are in trying to change. So because of that fact, each of us enters the organization on a daily basis and brings our core, and I'm talking like 3 to 5 values, our core values to the workplace. And that guides our behavior on a day-to-day basis, everywhere. It doesn't matter how old you are, what stage of your career you're in, whether you're at work or home, those core values follow us and drive how we behave, what we do. So the real culture of an organization is not determined by the leadership group that goes on an isolated offsite and identifies the core values to guide their organization that they post on the wall. The real definition of a culture is what is the aggregate of the core values that your people share in common. That's how your company's going to behave on a day-to-day basis. Now, before I get too far off on that tangent, of course, senior leadership has a huge role in guiding culture. Senior leaders should be the culture carriers of an organization. They identify where we want to be. What needs to happen next is to figure out where you are, to understand how your people are wired, and to look at the gap and decide, do we need to do something about it? Do we need to shift our culture? How do we bring our people along, knowing that people don't change very much? And that's the role of senior leadership, is to identify those pieces and pull them together. We talk about 3 levers at Round Peg: measure, manage, and monitor. So when I did this work as a consultant, the way we would help organizations is we would take a plane, go to their company, spend several days, up to 2 weeks, interviewing people, assessing the organization, surveying the population, and then we would write up analyses of what that company's culture was. And then we would help them evaluate senior candidates. Usually we were looking at CEO candidates in terms of culture fit. So not skills and abilities. Again, remember, it only accounts for 11% of that candidate's success. We're looking at how well they fit the culture, which was the biggest predictor of whether they're going to thrive as a CEO or a leader in this organization. So as you can imagine, that's pretty expensive to an organization. And what we would hear over and over again is, this is great, it works here. What do we do for the rest of the company? How do we make sure the rest of our organization is aligned? So we looked and looked and looked, and there wasn't anything. There was no software out there to provide an organization with a technological solution to understanding their culture, how it was really functioning, and then aligning everything they did around it. And since we know that's the biggest predictor of organizational success, Good to Great has a statistic. Companies whose employees are culturally aligned are 6 times more profitable than their competition. It's not just feel-good stuff. So we know it's critical, and yet there aren't tools out there, not one real tool that any company could pick up and figure out how to align their culture. So we built it. That's Round Peg. Round Peg is the culture company. We allow companies to manage their culture from the cloud using web-based social apps to understand their culture and then align their communication, their hiring, their development, and their engagement around their culture. Measure what you have, manage how you live your culture, how you communicate about your culture, how you hire people that are wired to be aligned with your culture because we're not going to change them very much, how you develop and engage your people in alignment with your culture, coach them, mentor them, and how you ensure that your people really live and breathe your culture on a daily basis. So it starts with you. If you have a young, burgeoning organization, maybe it's your first, maybe it's your 10th, just take a moment and think about what are your core values. It's not complicated. Sound bites, 3 to 5, that are really critical to you, that you live and breathe and want to be a part of everything you do. That's your culture. And then be vigorous and obsessed with ensuring that everything you do in your company is aligned around those 3 to 5 values. That's how you build a culture. It's a recipe for success. You can't compromise. Culture does matter. Thanks.